Oops. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Hockey Podcast. My name is Kevin Olenek. Of course, you can follow us on Twitter at podcast_hockey, like us on Facebook, The Hockey Podcast, and subscribe on Apple, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. It's been a week. I think that's the best way to say it. It's been a week. And we did record on Thursday, but we were missing a couple people. Chris was with us on Thursday. Was it Thursday? It was Thursday, wasn't it?
It indeed was.
Yeah. Jeez, man. Days don't count anymore. I think we need to ban them or something because they just are starting to blend in.
They all blend together at this point.
Yes. And Sean was also with us on Thursday, right?
Yeah. Well, I think so. Unless this is we're in some sort of matrix and reality is a construct or something like that. I don't know.
That might be it. Maybe we went with Bob and Doug on the spaceship and we never knew it. But Heidi and Devin were not with us. Hello, Heidi. Hello, Devin.
Hello.
Hello. We are surviving storms and rough sleep last night, so if we sound a little groggy, I think that's partially why. There were storms in Calgary late into the night. So we're slowly going to get into this, and then we will be better as we go. And, you know, even I in Vancouver, although not hearing the storms, had a rough sleep last night. But we are in the midst of, as sports have taken a turnaround, of course, as we know, the Bundesliga has been back for about 3 weeks with empty seats. The NBA is going to vote on a plan this week to have their own play-in. And baseball is a disaster right now. Hockey, however, Gary Bettman announced on Tuesday, for those who missed it, that the NHL has a play-in playoff scenario, which 24 teams, 12 from the East, 12 from the West, will be vying for the Stanley Cup. Seeds 5 until 12 from the East and the West will be playing in a best-of-5 series, with the top 4 seeds getting the round robin to determine who will sit in 1, who will sit in 2, who will sit in 3, and who will sit in 4. And then the 16 will start into the playoffs, and we will then determine a Stanley Cup. Training camps, I guess that's the best way to say that. Training camps are expected to start July 10th. As we enter into June, most facilities are expected to be open with a maximum of 6 players on the ice at a time. We will start with Heidi, because we did not hear from Heidi and Devin about this on Thursday, because if you missed it, we talked with Jack to review the 2012 draft with him. But Heidi, what are your thoughts? How do you feel about the new format?
I'm fine with how it worked, or how it's hopefully going to work if and when it actually starts. I know there was some talk about how it seemed unfair, but I think just with the fact that teams played an uneven amount of games and everything, something had to give, and I think it's fine, and I'm just excited for hockey to come back. And I like the idea of that Flames and Jets matchup. That'll be awesome. 'Cause the Jets are like one of my other favorite teams, so that'll be great for me to watch.
Yes, we'll get into the lineups a little bit later as well. Devin, what are your thoughts, as Toronto will be facing Columbus as well in the play-in?
Well, first of all, it's crazy that somebody else has admitted another love for another team other than myself. on this podcast, so I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah,
Heidi.
Let's stop here. We're Devin, you and I get a lot of flack for liking other teams other than a team that we like.
That's true. Sorry, yes, you as well with Canucks and Flames. Yeah.
I would just like to point out that actually, of Canucks fans being known as fair weather fans, but the Canucks fans that are here right now are the only ones who only cheer for one team.
That's valid.
Yes, it is.
As far as the format goes, as much as the playing committee did their best to make it all as like the format as good as possible, I'm pretty happy with it overall. It'll be interesting to see what the breakdown of games are, because I don't think that has been solidified yet. I know it's going to be 5 games, but then for the play-in to get into the actual quote-unquote playoffs. I'm excited to see Columbus and Toronto duke it out. Columbus has a great kind of blue-collar team, so I think they'll be giving Toronto a run for the money.
Sean and Chris, did anything strike you within the last few days about this format?
One thing that did get sort of clarified since we recorded was the what is playoffs and what isn't for the conditional picks, and the Canucks need to beat the Wild to quote unquote make the playoffs, and then they would give up that first round pick for this season in the JT Miller trade. So what's nice about that is the Canucks can give their young team some sort of semblance of playoff do or die hockey. Just in the play-in series and then if they can get in, then that's great, because then they can move on from the JT Miller trade, which I think for Canucks fans, I think that's the best thing that can happen at this point, so that we don't have another year of yelling into the abyss about trade value and all that crap, even though JT Miller has been an absolutely fantastic pickup for the Canucks.
They'll still be
young. And other than what Sean said, I don't really have anything to add, because we haven't really heard much more details since then. So, yeah.
Well, that first pick would go to New Jersey. So that's now the JT Miller, that pick does not go to Tampa Bay. That ends up to Jersey because of the Blake Coleman trade. So that's now interesting how that all changed in. The one thing that I think a few people have been, and Jack talked about this too, it felt like his perspective is they were trying to make sure that they do get the bigger market teams in the playoffs. And while I sort of understand that, when you actually look at the standings, the Chicago Blackhawks are actually only 6 points out of the wild card spot when this all stopped. I mean, granted, Nashville and Vancouver had one game in hand, but they were actually getting on a pretty good roll. So that's, I don't know. I don't think Chicago was technically necessarily out of anything. And Montreal, while they were 10 points behind Columbus, they still, mathematically, they still could have had a shot, I guess. I mean, Montreal, I guess, is a bit more of an argument than Chicago. But Chicago was a lot closer to the playoffs than I think a lot of people gave them credit for. I think people were sort of thinking Chicago was in a rebuild. But, now, the top 4, Devin and Heidi, I brought this up last recording. First of all, do you like the top 4 round robin where whoever has the best record gets the number one seed?
I think that it's just a way for those teams, instead of getting a bye, to actually get some playing time. I don't think it's fair per se, because they've obviously worked their asses off trying to seed themselves properly for the playoffs. So it's a bit of an unfair format in that way, but they do need to play some sort of meaningful games to get to playoff ready. So I think in that case it's good, but I don't think it's too fair.
Yeah, I didn't even really honestly think too much about it. They have to, my kind of thoughts on just all of this in general and how it's structured is that they had to do something, and it was always going to be unfair for some team, and there's no way for it to be fair for everyone. So it is what it is, in my opinion.
I had the brought up this idea that instead of having it be 1, 2, 3, 4, have it as the top seed gets to pick their opponent, and the number 2 seed gets to pick the next opponent. Number 3 seed picks an opponent. Number 4 seed gets the final opponent. What would you think of that?
As it's a little gimmicky. I do like it though. I mean, no matter what, this year we'll always have an asterisk beside it for the playoffs and regular season. So as far as the gimmickiness of it, I like it. But if it actually happened, I'd be a little upset.
Yeah, I don't really disagree with what Dev just said.
Yeah, no, neither do I. It's whatever. No opinion.
Yeah.
If you're going to try something as gimmicky as that, this is the year to do it, though, with how crazy everything is. So, but like I said, I said this on Thursday. The traditionalist in me for hockey just makes it too hard for me to say yes to.
Yeah, that's fair. I just thought it. I mean, I think that is almost worth playing for, trying to determine strategically how to get your path to the Stanley Cup, as opposed to not. I mean, because if let's say Montreal beats Pittsburgh and Carey Price is standing on his head. If you want to avoid Montreal, that would have been a way to do it, and let someone else try to take out Carey Price and that hot goaltender, right? So I don't know. I think that there would have been there's some interesting things in there to try to do, for sure. I guess quickly we'll just talk about the hub cities. Of course, Edmonton or Jason Kenney and Alberta have been making a pretty big pitch for Edmonton. I haven't heard from the mayor, and John Horgan has been standing up for Vancouver, but there are now about 10 cities, including Toronto, Chicago, Pittsburgh, Minneapolis has been considered, Vegas, Columbus, Pittsburgh. Devin, Heidi, what are your thoughts? It seems pretty foregone conclusion that Vegas is going to be one of them. What are your thoughts on the others?
I think Edmonton would be a pretty good place as well. Like they would have to do something about the whole border situation between the U.S. and Canada to allow for that. But if Vegas is going to get it for the West, I think that they won't have both hub cities being out in the West. They either need to have the other one be a little bit more centrally located, either centrally or more on the eastern side. But yeah, just because of the way that Vegas is and how they have all the accommodations and stuff. I don't know exactly how they're where they would be playing in Vegas. If they're playing out of T-Mobile, there's no hotel attached to it, but there's hotels super close. But if they play out of the Orleans Arena, it's a resort hotel, so they could all be playing be playing there. It's that place is actually like a really nice. I've been there actually a few times and looked around that place. So it's like a perfect little resort place, and there's places to eat and places that they, as I said, they could probably house quite a few people, and the arena is right in the building.
I'm just looking up.
I think that Vancouver would be a really good spot since they did have the Olympics there. I did hear Brian Burke talk about how the players were able to kind of move around without being seen during that time. And I think that'd be obviously the best way to go. But yeah, I agree with Heidi. You got to have at least one. In my mind, you have to have at least one team or one hub city in Canada, either in the east or the west, and then one opposite, either, say, if you chose Vancouver or Edmonton, the other one, in my mind, would have to be down in Pittsburgh or something like that.
Yeah, what about, like, where are you with Toronto? Do you feel that Toronto... do you feel Toronto is a good option at this point?
To be completely honest, I don't know. I think that it is. It could be. It definitely could be, but it's whether or not where COVID's at that point. What I know that Edmonton has been pitching for kind of more of a lifestyle aspect towards the players, and making sure that they are, potentially like there's going to be movie nights. From what I hear, other activities other than just going from the rink to the hotel and being in the hotel. So as far as Toronto goes, I would think that they would have some sort of or a similar pitch, but I haven't heard anything, and it to me, Toronto might not be a good place just because of the capacity, or like how many people are in that city and how it's all condensed. So to me, Edmonton probably makes more sense than Toronto.
Okay.
And there's way more cases still in Ontario and around in Toronto too, that I think is obviously still would be a big concern as well.
Yeah, I think it's 60, it's over 50% of the cases in Ontario are in Toronto. I know that. It's still pretty high.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and they're getting still triple digit case numbers every single day still.
Yeah.
So it's hard to I can't imagine them picking Toronto when that's what the case count still is around there.
So around the Orleans Arena, Heidi, you can correct me. I'm just looking at a map. You got the Bellagio. You've got a couple other places here. The Casino Resort, the Palms Villas, Gold Coast Hotel. Yeah, so that actually could work.
And T-Mobile is not very far because T-Mobile is obviously on the Strip. But so there's obviously all the hotels on the Strip, but where the Orleans is, there, as I said, there is it's a resort thing, so it has the hotel built in there, and I think they might actually have a movie theater actually also built in there. They might actually have both. And I'm sure that there's and I don't know with more hockey going on in Vegas lately, that maybe there has been more arenas that have sprung up, because they obviously have T-Mobile, they have the Orleans one, and then they have the Knights practice facility in Summerside, whatever it's called. No, Henderson's where the new arena is being built.
Oh, okay.
It's in Summerland, I think it's called. That's where their practice facility is, and I think that's not a very far drive either. So I think it makes Vegas makes a lot of sense. It's just I was wondering why. The only thing I'm concerned about Vegas is the fact that I thought that the city of Vegas might be more concerned with actually trying to bring tourists back and opening up their hotels for tourists. not necessarily for the NHL, unless they're planning on doing both. I'm not sure what's going on. I haven't actually heard too much from that.
Yeah, I did hear that they're talking about trying to open up very slowly. Vegas, the casinos are talking about opening up. Yeah, there's definitely some cons to Vegas, but it seems like the NHL has almost married themselves. At least it will be. It's Vegas's one, and I think everyone else is fighting for the second one. Is what I'm feeling from the information that I'm getting. Whether that's right or wrong, I guess we'll find out. But yeah, that's sort of the feeling I'm getting.
And in terms of Toronto, again, I think Toronto would be their number one choice for the other one if they can get all the COVID cases and get down to a decent number, but right now they're not. So I know Jack said they wanted everyone. I think everyone thinks that they're going to try and split it east-west. I don't think so. I think they're just going to try and find the two best options. Go for it. So I think we'll see Edmonton and Vegas as the two.
And as far as the other potential possibilities on that list, I think we can all safely say that Minneapolis is probably off of it with what happened this past week. And as far as Devin's idea, as far as one in Canada, one in the States, just because of the whole cross-border travel potential issue that's there, I'm not sure how valid that might be as far as executing that out. But yeah, no, I kind of agree with Sean that as much as the NHL wants to keep it east-west, ultimately I think they'll end up choosing the best two situations, regardless of geography at that point.
And the cross-border will come based off of how the Canadian government placates the NHL in terms of changing the 14-day quarantine, and if they can quote unquote quarantine within their bubble.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's still. I think that's. Sorry, there's an echo there, but I think that's going to be one of the strategies: is how do you get your players back? I know that Kyle Dubas is saying that they're bringing the Leafs players back slowly. I know, for example, the difficulty with the Canucks is you can skate in Sweden. So Pettersson, Markstrom, etc., a number of players for the Canucks are skating. If you come back here, you can't necessarily do that. You have to stay in a quarantine for 14 days and then skate. So that strategy, I think, is interesting as well. And I do think Ray Ferraro brought this up, and I think some people are catching on to this as well, is I think coaching is going to be very important in this. This is probably as much as we're all talking about this is going to be the Asterisk Cup, this might be the one cup that I think, not that coaching doesn't matter in the NHL, but the coaching will really matter in this because how you strategize, how you're able to communicate, how you're able to prepare at this particular point. I think it might be who has the best coach might have the best chance to win. I don't know if you guys are seeing it the same way or.
In a sense, yes. It's going to be who can come together, who can reconvene as a team and employ their systems better than the other teams. Because we're coming back. The first, these play-in series are going to be sloppy as. Ugh. It's going to look like exhibition games. It's going to look like the first few games of the regular season that's normally in October. It's when they're still trying to get their feet underneath them again. So you're gonna the teams that can find a way to simplify their system and be able to just deploy it properly. They're going to have a big advantage over the other teams if they can do that.
As rough as that might be, it actually might work out to Vancouver's advantage, because if you actually look at Vancouver's record in October under Travis Green, it's actually by far our strongest period of the season. It's always in the later parts of the season that we tend to tail off, but October we tend to have very strong starts with Travis.
I think the system and the structure is going to be massive. That's why Columbus playing Toronto, I think, is going to be a very interesting series, just because Tortorella really his structure is massive, and it's not so much run and gun. It's structured, if you will. Also Carolina, I think, is a kind of a dark horse as well. With Rob Brindamore and the way that he deploys his players. So I think Kevin's point and Sean's point are very valid.
That being said, I do think the teams that have like pure game breakers are going to have a big advantage as well. Canucks with Hughes and Pettersson, Toronto with Marner. I think they're going to have those players can take over a game with just their skill, and you can do that a lot easier when things are a little more sloppy. So I think those teams are going to definitely have a little bit more advantage, which is why I think, like Pittsburgh, Edmonton, but Edmonton, Chicago is going to be very, very interesting because you've got the veteran shutdown center in Jonathan Toews that can go up against McDavid or Draisaitl, and the Oilers are going to need to have both lines going to be able to handle Chicago, I think. But if you can have one player take over a game, you're going to be in a much better spot. So I think that's where Columbus and Carolina have. Well, not necessarily Carolina, but Columbus has doesn't have the advantage there. They don't have that game breaker up front, at least, that can take over a game like a lot of these teams.
Yeah, and if we're breaking down a little bit of Winnipeg, Calgary, I think Gaudreau hopefully will be able to pick apart that young defense, and Hellebuck is going to be heavily relied on. And I guess you can kind of say the same thing with Calgary's defense. They're definitely veteran laden, and they can do well, but they have shown to struggle. And Riddick will be tested as well. But I think overall on paper, I'm kind of leaning towards Calgary.
Where's Riddick quarantined at? Is he here in Calgary, or did he go back home to the Czech, or what?
I'm pretty sure.
I honestly have no idea.
Let me investigate on his Instagram.
Thank you.
Because I think a lot of people are, because Sweden's so open, teams with Swedish player like key Swedish players, they're expecting them to be ahead of the curve. So the Canucks got Markstrom, who's going to get more reps leading up into this than the North American goalies. They've got Pettersson, who's going to be out there. They've got Edler. Flames have Rasmus Andersson, Michael Backlund, Lindholm. They've got, and then you've got.
And showing
it's going to be very interesting to see who comes out and who's got that half step on other players.
I was going to say, I invested in my Instagram. I do not know where David Riddick is because he hasn't really been posting. All I know is that Elias Lindholm is hanging out with Markstrom, and I know Backlund is enjoying his pool, and I can tell you that.
And the Canucks are playing field hockey.
Yes. That the Flames Jets series, almost to me, I think if there is a series that is going to come down to goaltending, I feel like the best goalie in that series will win the series, whether it's Riddick or Hellebuck. I honestly don't see a huge difference between the two. You've got Gaudreau, there's Laine, there's Wheeler, Tkachuk, Scheifele, Lindholm. As much as people have kind of looked at that Winnipeg defense as poor. They almost seem to be better. Coaching, I think, is pretty even. Maybe I would give the edge to Winnipeg a little bit just in terms of experience. But to me, the way I look at it is, I think that this. I don't want to put pressure on David Riddick, and I don't know where he is, but I think this is probably he's going to be one of his most important playoff series of his NHL career. Because I think if he's better than Hellebuck, I think the Flames can win. But if he's not, I don't think they can win.
I'd give the edge up front to Winnipeg. That top six, when you've got one of the most underrated goal scorers in the league in Kyle Connor, Blake Wheeler, Mark Scheifele as your top line, and that leaves Ehlers and Patrick Laine on your second line. Like, it's just, I think you just that top six. I don't think you can say is on par or worse than Calgary's, even though Calgary does have one really good line as well, and then they can put Tkachuk on another. I just like the Winnipeg one more, but the Flames definitely have the better blue line, more proven blue line, and then as good as David Rittich can be, Connor Hellebuck is a Vezina caliber goalie.
Yep.
And Rittich hasn't proven that yet, so you got to give that to Winnipeg as well. But if the Flames can find a way to shut down, use their advantage on defense and shut down those high flying forwards on Winnipeg, then they definitely have a chance, because then they're giving Rittich a better chance as well to match up against Hellebuck.
Yeah, and this is why I think this is going to be a really good series, because both teams have their advantages and disadvantages, obviously. So I think the Flames are going to be a little bit they're going to be hungry after what happened last year in the playoffs. They're going to they're going to want to not have that kind of embarrassment again, and that should give them a little drive. I honestly don't want to discredit also Cam Talbot in goal either, because if Riddick can't do it, like, Talbot could come back and surprise us too, right? So, and I honestly can't remember who Winnipeg's backup goalie is. So, someone remind me of who it is.
Former Flame Laurent Brossoit.
Yes.
Yeah. So.
He's also former Oiler.
I have no comment on him. So yeah, either way, it's going to be a very fun, interesting matchup for sure.
Yeah, I would say it's a pretty 50-50 split for me as far as choosing a favorite. I might kind of go with Sean here and give the edge to Winnipeg, just because the combination of having both that top six as well as Hellebuck, even though Calgary has the better defense, I just feel like, just by the narrowest of margins, I'd probably go with Winnipeg.
Yeah, I think one of the big questions with Calgary too is, and Ryan Pike didn't put him in the lineup, but what does Juuso Välimäki play? He certainly would seem to be available to play, and I think that speed will be, a good asset. So that I think will be interesting as well. As far as Minnesota-Vancouver, that's also an interesting matchup, in that Minnesota fired Bruce Boudreau. They brought in Dean Evison. They went unbeaten with him. They have a very interesting goaltending situation, and Devin Dubnyk being their number one became sort of the backup for Alex Stalock during the year. They have some guys that are veterans, Parise, and you got your Ryan Suiters. It's an interesting matchup. I feel, for me, I think the edge that the Canucks bring is depth. And I do think a bit of an edge in goaltending. Defense, I probably would give to Minnesota, but forward-wise, I think Vancouver has a bit of an edge, I think, especially in terms of depth. But I don't think it will be an easy matchup. It's probably a 4-game series.
Yeah, the Canucks have the edge on forwards. Again, you look at their top six when you can throw with Toffoli added this at the deadline, and then you can throw either him or Besser on the second line with Tanner Pearson and Bo Horvat, and then you still have Adam Gaudette and his quote unquote third line, and then they can throw together with the amount of options they have now that they're going to be pretty much fully healthy going into the play this series. They can put together a lineup that matches up against Minnesota quite well, I think. And the Minnesota does have the edge on the blue line. You've got Ryan Suter, who's still a minute munching force. You've got Matt Dumba, who's a dynamic offensive defenseman, and you got Jared Spurgeon and Jonas Brodin as your top four. Unfortunately, the Canucks can't match up with that, even with Quinn Hughes as the best defenseman in this series. But I'm pretty sure we can all agree that the Canucks have the edge in goal with Markstrom, especially the way he had been playing. If Markstrom's up to that level of play, he's going or even close. I don't think whether it's Stalock or Dubnyk, I don't think the Wild can match up against Markstrom that well enough. So I have the Canucks as a pretty solid favorite in this series, but Minnesota's a scrappy team, and they do have some good players that can make it really tough on the Canucks if the Canucks can't get rolling.
Yeah, for the same reasons that I gave the edge to Winnipeg, the same reason I would give the edge to Vancouver. Like the forwards as well as the goaltending just kind of makes them the stronger choice. Like Minnesota definitely has a rock solid defense core, but I'm just not sure with the instability in goal as well as the question marks that they have for forwards. I honestly think even though Minnesota was like quite strong before the pause and Vancouver was kind of on the opposite end of that before the pause, I still think that Vancouver has the edge in this.
I think I agree. Vancouver, I think, is going to edge Minnesota out, but I think a big game breaker is potentially having Michael Ferland back if he's healthy enough to return. Because he can. I mean, Vancouver knows that he can take over a playoff series if he wants to. So yeah, I think that if he can play, then the scrappiness of Minnesota doesn't really have a chance.
As much as Ferland could be the game a big boost or whatever, I think Josh Levo, if he's healthy, is a big wild card for the. He was playing really well and being used to push up into like top six, but with Bo Horvat before he got injured, and now that top six is pretty much solidified, you could throw him on the line with, like, say, Anton Roussel and Adam Gaudette, and you could have a very, very good, grinded out but offensive third line to really to match up with the scrappiness of Minnesota. And then they can throw in Zach McEwen, who really stepped up at the end of the year. Tyler Mott can add some speed and scrappiness. The Canucks bottom six, if put together properly, can really nullify that scrappiness the Wild have, and then let the top six really shine with their top end skill.
Yeah, for sure. Like I totally agree with that as well. Like a healthy Canucks team I think definitely has a distinct advantage as far as depth is concerned.
Heidi, did you have anything to
add? My brain shifts towards the Canucks having the advantage on it, just with no real other reason, just to say that in my brain, the Canucks are the better team. That being said, I know that Minnesota can be surprising, though. Like, they could just be just playing like shit, and then all of a sudden you play them, and they're, as I said, that scrappiness is what I remember most about Minnesota. So I honestly think this whole playoff thing is going to be a crapshoot anyway. So who knows? It doesn't matter, like, honestly, how teams were playing before or thing. Like, we don't know how some of these people or some of these players have kept in shape or kept their skills up, and depending on what. So, like, I don't know. The whole thing is just going to be chaos, and so I don't really feel like I can make an argument either way for any team in any of these matchups.
Yeah, it's going to be a bit of a coin flip for I think almost all the play-in series. The only, even that, like, the only one I would say has the potential to not be is the Pittsburgh-Montreal. But if Carey Price is on his game, he could steal that. He could steal that series. But one player the Canucks definitely need to keep an eye on is Kevin Fiala.
Yeah,
been he was absolutely lighting it up in February and March. Better than a point per game. So they need to make sure that they keep him under wraps. And if they do, I think that will go a long way to shutting down a very not a top end offense that Minnesota has.
They will have someone that we will probably talk about a little bit later on there, and Alex Galchenyuk as well. But I don't know if he'll be a huge factor, but we'll have to see. Speaking of chaos, we did not get into the NHL lottery, which has the potential for chaos and either smiles on one hand or anger on another, or all kinds of things. But basically, the NHL lottery is scheduled to start the June 26th. They will have the first three. And if one of the names, so the teams that are eligible now are the teams that are not in the playoffs. And let me make sure I have this. It's Buffalo, New Jersey, Detroit, Ottawa, San Jose, Los Angeles, Anaheim, and as I go through this here, I'm making sure I'm not missing anyone as my computer's moving slowly. All the California teams. So San Jose, LA, Anaheim. We've got Detroit, Ottawa, New Jersey, and Buffalo. And the losers of these play-in rounds will also have a crack at getting the number one pick. If one of the teams that comes up is a NHL team on the 26th, it will be one of the loser teams that have an opportunity. So I think a lot of people love the chaos of this. Do we like this? Is this interesting? Or is this almost more unfair than how the playoffs work?
Well, with it just being so chaotic that one of Edmonton or Pittsburgh is going to lose in that and then get the first overall pick, right?
Yeah, probably.
Entertainment-wise, chaos-wise, I love it. But I don't know. I don't like that it's a two-tier draw type deal. I'd prefer them to do it afterwards, because there is a chance that you see all three lotteries, like a very small chance, but you could see it where all three lotteries are won by the placeholder teams, and you have a check. You're at the point where you have teams playing, knowing that if they lose, they get a top three pick, or a really good chance at a top three pick, because there'll be another 4 teams coming, having a chance, or whatever. 6 teams, 8. But so, like, 3 out of 8 teams could potentially get that. It's just weird chaos, and I just don't necessarily like it. But in terms of, like, the chaos, bring it on.
I like it. I mean, as far it gives a chance to the teams that aren't in the playing games to potentially win it, and then it just adds a little bit more fun into the potential that a team that gets kicked out in the playing games can potentially get the first, second, or third overall picks. So as far as like under the circumstances, I love it. And the only reason why, in my mind, that they are doing it on June 26th is for content. That's the only reason I can think of. But what's really interesting, actually, is if Toronto loses, they actually have a chance to get that pick, even though they sent their first round pick to Carolina so that Patrick Marleau could get bought out. If it is a top 10 pick that they get, then they will keep it and give Carolina the 2021 first round pick. So even if Toronto loses and one of those top 3 picks is available, that Toronto could also get it as well.
Oh, that's a good point. Okay, because it is protected. Yeah. Okay. Hmm.
Yeah, it's the same with the Canucks and that JT Miller trade, first round pick. If they lose in the play-in series, if they lose in the play-in series, then they pick in this year's draft in the first round and move an unprotected pick to Jersey now.
Oh, Sean, your volume went down there.
Okay. Do you hear me now?
Yeah, it was weird. It was just, it's kind of just, you faded away.
Into nothingness?
Nothingness.
That sounds like 2020.
Yes, it sounds very 2020. I don't know. I mean, it's fun, and I think we needed some fun, and I agree with Devin. It was about content. But I would have preferred it if it was just the top 6 or the eliminated teams had the best shot. Chris, Heidi, sorry, I interrupted.
Oh, totally fine. I agree with both Sean and Devin for different reasons. Like, I'm with Sean in the sense that I would probably prefer it to be later on, but I agree with both Kevin and Devin in the sense that, yeah, they're absolutely doing it at that point just for content reasons.
Yeah. I find it so. I'm just gonna say this again. I find it so hard just to just offer an opinion on all these things because, and I hate saying this, but like that whole term unprecedented times, it's gonna seem weird however it's going to be, but I don't know. I'm looking forward to a lot of just being chaotic and hilarious. Maybe it'll be a nice little break from everything else going on in 2020.
Sure. One thing, just before we get onto the other thing that I just, it's been something that just came up in my head here, but in terms of content, Devin sparked the idea. I think that one of the things that the NHL or Sportsnet or these TV networks need to do is, before this lottery, let's get some replays of some of these junior games of some of these top players in people's eyes. Like, Lafreniere, Byfield, whatever that they can do so there can be a little bit of excitement of what we're actually talking about. It's just like, oh, you get the third pick, and who is that third pick going to be? What is so valuable about the lottery? I think this is one of those things where the NHL and professional hockey can put some support towards the junior game right now, which is struggling a little bit. But in terms of where they're at, I don't know. I think it would be very valuable to get some eyeballs on junior hockey right now. Not that the game is played, but who are these players that we're going to watch be drafted?
I think we'll see that coming up more closer to whenever the draft is, or once we get the ball rolling, but for hockey to come back. Sorry, Dev.
No, that's all good. I think that's a great point, Kev. We got 26 days here until the first phase of the draft, and potentially second phase after the playing games. I think no time like right now to really push the juniors who each one is and how good they are, what their strengths are, what the weaknesses are, all that stuff. I think that's a fantastic point.
Yeah. So speaking of draft, as we transition here seamlessly, this tweet came out this week. I want to thank the Vancouver Canucks organization, its fans, and the city for the past 12 years. I am very grateful for the opportunity to have led the amateur scouting department. I leave proud of the work we did, the collaboration within the department, and the replenishment of the prospect pool. Unfortunately, an agreement on the level of input going forward with regard to staff personnel and process could not be reached. For those who worked with me, I enjoyed working as a team, and please know our friendships are forever. That tweet was from @Judd4the Defense, named Judd Brackett, as the Vancouver Canucks and Judd Brackett have announced that they will be parting ways as the contract expires on June 30th. There was anger on one end, believing that Brackett has done some magnificent work within the draft as he led the scouting department the last few years. There's other people that simply think that Judd Brackett's a bit of a myth, that Judd Brackett found a way to give himself more credit than he deserved. There's a number of different things that have happened here. So I don't think that this is... I think, Sean and Chris, I think we agree this is not a surprise that this happened, but is this as significant of a deal as some are making this out to be?
It's tough to say because we don't know the ins and outs of the Canucks scouting department and how it actually runs. All we know is that Judd Brackett has worked well, and under his watch as the head of amateur scouting, they've done quite well finding players like Brock Besser, Elias Pettersson, Adam Gaudette, and then amongst others that are still under development. I think everyone needs to understand that the Canucks are not better off with Judd Brackett leaving. This is a loss for the team, but I do think that scouting, player development, and everything is a group based part of it, and you can't just, if one person's making that big of an impact, then that is, I think, more of a problem than anything else, and showing that something really needs to change. But I don't think that's the case with the Canucks. I do think that they've got some really good scouts on the lower end, and then they have they also have Ryan Beach, who's head of video scouting, so he can help identify some players as well. So I do think that they're still in okay shape, but they do need to find a way to recover from this PR blow that this infighting seems to have created.
Yeah, I would definitely agree that this is not surprising that it turned out this way. It had been rumored to be happening like this for probably the past month or so. But as far as my personal opinions about it, I'm not too involved as far as my feelings on Judd Brackett. But one of the interesting things I did read is that with him being there for the last 12 years, you can make an argument that the drafting actually quite drastically improved after Benning and his crew joined the franchise. So you could kind of make an argument either way, but I do agree with Sean that it's definitely still going to be a loss for the Canucks. It's not a good PR look as far as not being able to keep your head amateur scout, but we're not the only team in that regard. Sean or Devin could probably back me up, but I believe LA is also going through a similar situation with one of their top amateur scouts.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I don't have super strong feelings either way, but, you could probably make arguments either way as far as Judd's importance to the organization.
the amount of information out there, misinformation, partial information, misleading information that is being thrown out there, whether on who was really involved in drafting certain players, trying to create a narrative to match what each writer, fan, player, media person is trying to create is quite insane. And it's really tough to try and sift through it to try and figure out what the actual, what the closest thing you can find to the truth is. It's not, there's definitely no black or white, like correct or wrong out there. I'm sure every piece of information's got some sort of truth to it, but it's really, really tough to sift through this information to try and figure out what is, what really happened here and why there was such a falling out to a point where Judd Brackett turned down a 2-year extension to head up the amateur scouting for the Canucks. So it is a loss, but I do think there are still pieces in place for the Canucks to continue drafting and developing players well.
And
John,
John's
the question.
Sorry. You can go ahead, Dev.
Well, it was just could it be another Linden thing?
Well, I do think that it's pretty apparent that Benning and Weisbrod want to be brought in on all decisions and discussed with all decisions, and instead of say like a more of a Mike Gillis approach, where he would give like a lot of autonomy to his head scouts and everything, and then they would just collab on certain parts. But I do think it probably is just Benning and Weisbrod making sure that everyone in the organization does know who's in charge here. For better or worse, unfortunately, we don't know which way it's going to go, though.
And I do think Sean is right in the sense that we don't want to give too much credit to just one person. It is very much a team effort as far as scouting for an organization is.
So I want to ask about someone that is not getting talked about a lot, but he seems to me, have had a pretty good influence on the scouting department of the Vancouver Canucks from where I'm sitting. Does Thomas Gradin get enough credit for what he's done?
For the Swedes, I would say he probably gets the credit that he deserves, but I don't know too much about scouting. Maybe Sean might have more to say.
Thomas Gradin, he when he was based in Sweden was found a few gems for the Canucks over the years, but he's actually now out living in Vancouver and scouting WHL. So I wouldn't be surprised he was one of the big vocal people for Cole Lind a couple years ago. But yeah, he's been there for so long and been through all the different regime changes. But I do think that he deserves a little. I don't think he gets lately. I don't think he's gotten the credit he deserves. But he was definitely the one who discovered Alex Edler, and everyone who sort of looks into that discovers that and gives him credit for it. So, but it's such a team deal, and one of the reasons Judd Brackett's been getting so much credit over the last little bit is the how well the Canucks have mined the northeast of the states to find players. Like I said, we can go through them again. Brock Besser, Adam Gaudette, as two that are on the team now that are doing very well. I think he might have even been when he was part-time. He might have been the one who discovered Chris Tanev a little bit, although I think that was actually Dave Gagne more than anything else. But then you've got others that are coming up through the ranks. You got Jack Rathbone, who's pushed his way up to arguably a top three prospect for the Canucks behind Hoglander and Podkolzin. So it's just the way where the Canucks have had the most success is where Judd Brackett has come up through. So it's hard not to link him to all that. And y'all know how Canucks fans and media can be. They find something, they lock in on it, and then that's what it is. And there's no understanding the nuances, unfortunately. But like I said, it's unfortunate it went this far, and whatever the reason was, it's unfortunate. And but at this point, the Canucks and fans need to move on and try and figure out what the future looks like.
And just another quick note, going back to Gradin before we switch the topic again, I think that he definitely has been given his due credit as far as both like what Sean said in regards to Edler, but also the Sedins. He's definitely has gotten, like, those are definitely the feathers in his cap.
Yeah. Sure. I just, what I'm sensing and even reading this was. It certainly felt like a power struggle in some ways, and I'm not saying this is right or wrong. This is an observation, but this seems like a guy that was really into promoting himself and wanted more autonomy, and kind of felt like he was a bit of a whiz kid in a sense, and probably pining, quite frankly, probably long-term looking for a way to get into a general manager chair in the NHL. And I'm not saying that that's wrong at all, but it certainly felt like there's been some PR campaigning here from Judd Brackett that I'm not familiar with other scouts that have ever done this. But if you even reading what he said here, unfortunately, I'd agree with a level of input going forward with regard to staff personnel. It seemed to me he wanted more input. He wanted more autonomy, and he just wasn't going to get it in Vancouver. And however Benning sees it was right, but there's a bit of self-promotion here.
I disagree. I think a lot of this, what you're seeing is self-promotion. I think is more just the result of the Vancouver fan base and the Vancouver market just being so rabid and just so like insatiable for more and more Canucks content, that once they found out who was kind of behind a lot of these picks, they championed him, and it just became it just took off at that point. I don't think it was anything that Judd Brackett did other than just doing his job. And yes, he did want more autonomy. I think everyone who does a job wants more autonomy. They don't want to run every single decision by their boss, because it's just that it can be a bit of a time waster at times. But I think because from what I heard, and again, it's trying to sift through it all. Yeah, he wanted more autonomy on who to hire. He wanted more. I think he wanted full control over the first two picks of the draft, which you never really see. Usually, the first pick is a collaborative effort where the GM, because because of the magnitude of how everyone sees the first round, any miss is not necessarily going to fall on the head of amateur scouting. It's going to fall on the GM. Yeah. So I think it's just, I don't think he was part of this. A lot of this PR, I think that was more the market more than anything else. But he definitely was pushing for more autonomy, and again, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just you got to know when to stop, and I don't think he did. Because if you listen to some of the insiders the amount of autonomy he was looking for it's a little bit farther than what 99% of structures in the NHL already are actually done the way it's done. So maybe they kind of should have thought more outside the box and given it to him, or maybe they should have, but they didn't, and now they're moving on to try and find a new head of amateur scouting.
Yeah, the feeling I'm getting is that he may have felt a little spoiled under the Gillis regime and the amount of autonomy that Gillis gave him then. So then when Benning and Weisbrod are trying to rein power back to the GM position, he probably was like, wait, what? Why is this happening? And I agree with Sean in the sense that, yeah, it's probably more market-driven than a ego-driven campaign from Brackett himself.
Just to correct you there, Chris. Yes, Brackett was brought on by Gillis, but he was only a part-time scout at that point. He was named head of amateur scouting under Linden, and then Linden gave him the voice when they were trying to. I think it was Besser and Pedersen in terms of the first two big picks for Brackett.
Yeah, I stand corrected. I fully admit that I only know about surface level stuff in regards to Brackett. I'm not super in depth, so yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I just from some of the things I also heard, it just felt like there were questions of where some of this information was coming from, like who picked who. Hearing from Elliot Friedman, there was a speculation of asking why some of this came out. It's not a good look for the Canucks organization, and I don't know if, I guess to me, I don't know if it's a good look for Brackett either. Yes, I mean, yeah, should they have thought outside the box? I guess, maybe, who knows? Maybe Brackett will land on his feet somewhere else, and he's confident of that. And it's not great, but it's probably, I think at the end, it's probably best for both Brackett and the Canucks, that the Canucks organization, that they've moved on, and we'll see what happens from there. But it doesn't seem it. I guess from my perspective. It is a loss. It is going to be a hurt, but I also think that there is some things. I think the Canucks have the opportunity to replace him anyway. Just me. Does anyone else have any thoughts on that?
No, I think we're pretty much all in agreement at this point.
All right, we'll move on. There's been a lot of talk about how people have speculated the future of Connor McDavid, what's going to happen if the Oilers don't make the playoffs, all of that sort of stuff. But Jack Eichel lashed out at the Buffalo Sabres organization, saying he's tired of, it's been a very difficult 5 years. It's been very frustrating. It got to a point that Devin pulled out a poll asking who's more likely to be traded, asked for a trade, Eichel or McDavid. Devin, who won that poll? Devin?
Oh. Yeah, sorry. Last time I checked, there was 8 votes in total, a whopping 8 votes, and it was all for Eichel.
Wow. Okay, so
let me just double check here.
We need to get you more. Still need to get you more followers, and B.
Actually, all right. So we have 9 votes, 89% Eichel and 11% McDavid. And as far as I got 2 new followers last night, so I'm up to 16, just as an FYI for followers.
Yeah. We talked about Eichel a few weeks ago with when we were reviewing a draft, and I wasn't as high on him as other people. I mean, there's certainly some talent here, and you're right about this organization, but do we think Eichel's going to ask for a trade, or do we think the Sabres are going to turn this around, or what's what's going to happen here?
I think Eichel's going to ask for a trade within if things don't turn around, if they don't make the playoffs, the 2021 season, then I think that he's going to ask for one. He's a winner. He wants to win, and you can tell that he's frustrated. He hasn't made the playoffs since he's been in the NHL. So with his pride, with his skill, I feel like he'll definitely find a landing spot somewhere, whether or not someone wants to take on his $11 million. But yeah, I'd say if they don't make it next year, then yeah, I think he's done there.
Yeah, and we talked earlier in the season that there seems to be something in the water there, both the fan base as well as the players. Like I believe Ristolainen said something earlier in the season as well about him not being happy. So yeah, I think there's definitely something going on in Buffalo that is not making a lot of people happy. As far as how they rectify that and move forward from that totally remains to be seen.
Yeah, the Sabres have 1 to 2 years to turn this around before they're going to have to deal with a trade demand from Michael. I think there's definitely, they need to fix this as quickly as possible. Otherwise, they're just going to be they need to. Otherwise, they're going to lose the franchise center.
Heidi, any thoughts?
Sean keeps putting the mute button on right before I was going to say something, even though I wasn't maybe going to let somebody else say something. But anyways, no, like I get it. I can understand why he's frustrated and like why he would speak out. But at the same time, like I don't know. I still like to think that when you're an NHL player, your team is your employer, and you need to be careful about saying stuff like that. Like that could be seen as disrespecting your employer, but yeah, I understand his frustration. Like, I feel like Eichel was just so hyped, and the fact that he's just playing on a team where he just doesn't seem to be, and just doesn't seem to be shining as a star is frustrating for sure.
Just pulling up the quote if I can find it. I can't here. What do you fed up and frustrated? What is this disrespectful to the team? Do people feel that?
No. If it was like after one season and they missed the playoffs and they made like say the previous two, then I would say that it might be. But at this point, he's not the first. He won't be the last unless they can change things. There is definitely something wrong with that organization, and they need to fix it. And until you can give these very competitive players some playoffs and make some progress, they're gonna continue to spout off like this, and there's nothing wrong with it.
And if there's something seriously going on there, if their captain and franchise center is the one making these statements, like, something's going on. So, yeah, like, I don't think it's unreasonable. Like, yeah, it could be maybe construed that way, but I honestly don't think it's across beyond the pale is the expression I was looking for.
Yeah, you have Ryan O'Reilly. He said it before he left Buffalo. You had that one player, I don't know, I forget his name. He terminated his contract for not being happy. I mean, that might not be Buffalo's fault, but it's definitely a part of the organization. The Pagulas, I don't know, if it seems like them as owners, they need to step up and, they've from the top down, you have how many different coaches that have been there within the past 5 years. Phil Housley, one of them. Those other ones are other coaches are not come to mind. But there's definitely something there, and if they don't change it soon, I feel so sorry for those fans, because all I've heard is that they are passionate, loving fans, and it's a great hockey city. So it's actually really sad to see them not doing well. I feel for the players, and I feel mostly for the fans.
It was Patrick Berglund who went the other way in the Ryan O'Reilly deal, and then he had the same issue. He he terminated his contract and is now playing in back home in Sweden and is much happier. I don't know what exactly that was, but when you have a pattern of a list of players who are having troubles with this, and then one literally goes to another team, starts enjoying playing hockey again and wins a cup and wins the Conn Smythe, that says a lot more about the franchise than the players who are making these comments.
Especially when they were in one of the worst positions of the NHL in St. Louis, one of the worst teams in the NHL, and then they came back to win the Stanley Cup. That says a lot about that organization too. But it's unfortunate for Ralph Kruger, who I think is now not going to get another chance here in the NHL, because they're probably going to have to move on for a different coach at some point. And he's another scapegoat, which is another topic for a different time. But it will be interesting to see what happens with Jack Eichel and the Buffalo Sabres. And if there's anything, I found a new person to follow, Mallory Martin. She's sort of a Gillian Fisher light. She plays music and anyway. I'll talk about that later. So on Thursday, we brought in Jack to talk about the 2012 draft, which he felt bad. So we did touch on the 2010-2011 draft also for him. But we're continuing our series of reviewing the drafts, and we are on 2012. And this was the reason we brought in Jack from Oilers YYC, was because Nail Yakupov was the first pick of that draft. And he is not in the NHL anymore. Arguably, probably one of the worst first picks in the history of NHL drafts, and the 2012 draft as a whole is not considered one of the greater drafts. But we did not get Devin and Heidi's perspective on who their top five would be, which there is a Leaf connection with Morgan Rielly. Maybe kind of we'll start talking a little, get your perspective on what happened with Yakupov, and kind of looking overall at how you saw that draft turn out.
Yeah, Yakupov. I have a list of kind of like the top first overall pick busts. Yakupov is top three. Patrick Stepan, Rick DiPietro. I have Gord Kluzak from 1982 draft, which was the Scott Stevens, Doug Gilmour draft, and Alexander Daigle as well from 1993. It's hard to watch them go, it was hard, but at the same time, they were the laughing stock of having first overall picks that were busts or that didn't really pan out. And there was always the thought process that they would go for a defenseman, Ryan Murray, who went to Columbus. So he hasn't really panned out. He's the bottom pairing defenseman right now in my mind. But that's also the Galchenyuk draft. Griffin Reinhart went after that to the Islanders. But just to give you my top three as of right now, Morgan Rielly and Tom Wilson are at the top of that. And you also have Jacob Trouba and Philip Forsberg is another one that is at the top of my list. So those are kind of like my top five right there. Some honorable mentions.
No Freddie Anderson?
Well, honorable mentions here. Freddie Anderson for sure. Jacob Slavin, Parenko. You got Matt Dumba in there as well. And Shane Gostisbehere as some of my honorable mentions. But definitely Anderson is up there for sure. He was number 6 for me. I'm probably going to get raked over the coals by some Toronto fans, I'm sure. But, Morgan Rielly's he's a cornerstone defenseman in my mind, for sure.
So your top pick is Rielly from this draft?
It's a tie between Rielly and Tom Wilson, just because the impact that Tom Wilson has on the game, other than his stupidity, is like when he plays hockey, he plays it very well. He is the modern day power forward. So yeah, and then Morgan Rielly, great puck moving defenseman. And then, like I said, after that, you had Trouba up there, Forsberg, and then my honorable mentions as well. But those are kind of like my top 5.
This is where I'm going to point out that I did not do my homework. I have no opinion on 5s, but I'm always a fan of the Oilers making terrible mistakes in the draft.
Oh.
That is what I have to say.
Well, they've done a few of those, so.
It's a well-earned reputation.
Yeah.
Yeah, on Thursday, I didn't have Tom Wilson in my top 5 when I did it on Thursday, but I did put him as an honorable mention because he is what I called him, the nuclear bomb that is Tom Wilson. So, but yeah, I had just to refresh, it was Forsberg number 1. I think it was Morgan Rielly number 2. Then it was Jacob Slavin number 3. I think we talked about this. I think if he wasn't playing in Carolina, if he was playing in any top market, he'd be getting a lot more love. And then you've got Trouba and Hampus Lindholm, who Devin didn't mention, but it was for what is a very weird draft is a very strong defense class, drafted all over the place. So
I misplaced my 5 from earlier in the week, but the one thing I do want to mention is, as far as 5 through 10, this is probably like the strongest back half of the top 10 that we've done so far, I think. Like there's a lot of names there that you're like, oh crap, he's actually doing quite well. So yeah, I think it's one of the stronger top 10s.
I don't think we mentioned Colton Parayko again.
Yeah,
he's part of this. Thomas Hertl, Teuvo Teravainen, Tanner Pearson. He's had a really good career. I think he's top 5 in points. So,
and something that I mentioned on Thursday, oddly strong draft for goalies as well.
Yep. My
yeah,
top,
for sure.
Actually, my first pick would have been Vasil. I'm probably got a little laugh, but Vasilevsky would have been my first. I went Rielly, then I went Forsberg, Rielly, Slavin. But again, you could flip those two, and then I went Thomas Hertl, number 5.
Oh, you also have Hellebuck in there, Matt Murray.
Yeah.
I actually would have had Slavin as in my top 10 as well. But Brady Shea as well. He's up there too. Underrated defenseman. Cedric Paquette, who's a solid role player down in Tampa Bay as well. I'm not going to go through my solid players like I did the last one. I'll keep it there, but there's definitely a lot more. Yeah.
Jimmy Vesey was in this draft as well. Essa Lindell,
highly touted college player for sure.
Essa Lindell is also in this draft.
Well, like I said on Thursday too, the best player that the Oilers drafted is now on the Flames, Eric Gustafsson.
Yep. Again, excellent. No, sorry. Okay. Is there anything we missed? we need to talk about? Getting shakes of heads, no. So how do we follow everyone on Twitter?
I am Beardy Canuck 03.
I am at.
Oh, you muted out again.
Try again.
Oh, sorry. I'm at Hyde Amazeballs on Twitter and all social media.
I am Gord Howe 09. Sorry, what was that? How do we follow you, Chris?
Sorry, I didn't realize I was muted at the time. I'm at Schneids on all social media.
Gord Howe. And
Follow Devin.
Follow Devin. I'm KVOLE, but follow Devin. Follow Devin. Follow Devin. Follow Devin. We'll talk to you all soon. But follow Devin. Bye for now.